we doing? So as of this recording, it's been a week since Charlie Kirk has died. I don't know that things have gotten better. Because ultimately, as friend of the channel Billy and Dr. Jamar Tisby said, even if somebody is evil, nobody deserves to be murdered. And that's brought up some of my long-standing feelings about politics and the sanctity of life in the United States. Because Charlie Kirk himself, in a moment of, I'm sure he felt inspired argumentation, declared that gun deaths were the price to pay for other people being able to own guns. That doesn't sound like a moral. That's not moral. That's not morals. That's not about morals. That's about politics. That's somebody who doesn't believe. That's somebody who doesn't believe that all lives are sacred by virtue of their own existence. And that's what the sanctity of life is. The sanctity of life suggests that of human beings being alive, and that's what the sanctity of life is. Of human beings being alive, dogs being alive, grass being alive to greater and lesser degrees of importance and independence, and, all those things deserve to keep living, because in the Christian tradition that I'm a part of, things that are alive are holy, to greater and lesser extent, because I use herbicide, babies. I am not letting an invasive weed take over and prevent everything else from growing. So there are degrees, and that's why another very important part of the Christian tradition is the Imago Dei. That is the image of God. We are, as human beings, in possession of some sort of likeness that is similar to the way God exists. So, humans, different than grass, different than grasshoppers, different than single-cell bacteria, amoebas, because in the Christian tradition, the tradition that Charlie Kirk was a part of, contrary to what his stated opinions about gun deaths were, you're not supposed to find it acceptable for people to die. And that's where the politics come in, right? Because morals are different than politics. And without knowing Charlie Kirk personally, or indeed ever watching anything that he has said for more than 30 seconds, I rage quit. I don't have to listen to him. I do not have to listen to him in order to know what he's saying, because it turns out other people do. And they said wasn't particularly a creative thinker. It was just a really good debater. And that's different. That's politics. That's not philosophy. That's not what he's trying to do. The stated purpose of his organization, which insert name here, Turning Point USA. I'm hungry. I need to eat. I have dinner in a half hour. We got to get these things going. Was to create a conservative movement for young people. And he was able to do that. And unfortunately for everyone in the entire world, that meant that the conservative neo-fascist movement has gotten investment of people who are under the age of, 40? To be fair, no one should be invested in the politics of death. But I guess that's a personal opinion, right? Because the sanctity of life, as I see it, touches 3 different political issues, all of which have greater and lesser things to be said about Charlie Kirk's death, because absolutely 100% we have already touched on gun violence, and we know what Charlie Kirk feels about gun violence, but that's only a tangential issue. In the eyes of the law, we are just being negligent. to use some legal jargon, right? We're just being negligent by allowing people to get a hold of guns because they want them. That's just negligence. That's not actual, malice of forethought or intention, because we intend for people to die of the death penalty. We intend to prevent women from getting access to health care that is known as abortion, because we don't want babies to die. We intend to prevent doctors and others from, including people of their own volition, from ending their own life using medical technology, because we believe that only God should decide when people live and people die. Apparently. I'm here to tell you, if you want all of those opinions to be internally consistent, you're going to have to give up one or the other. And this is the thing that humans want. Humans do want to be internally consistent. We want our beliefs to vastly make sense alongside each other. So the way I more Charlie Kirk to the extent that I do, and I did genuinely, it's a horrific thing that happened to him and his family and everyone he knew that knew him. That was a trauma. The way I can get around the fact that he was also evil is I don't believe evil people deserve to die. But this is why friend of the channel, Billy, and her Substack called Who Deserves to Die is really, the foundational to my video here, because she then says, after talking about Dr. Jamar Tisby, who helped her elucidate her own feelings, the next question after Who Deserves to Die would be,
so how evil does a person have to be before it becomes morally acceptable to kill them?
If you, unlike me, say, well, evil people deserve to die, how evil does somebody have to be for them to be killed? Under Billy's analysis, that I agree with, a lot of people think Charlie Kirk wasn't evil enough to be murdered. Therefore, he wasn't an evil person, but he was. He actively wished harm on people in order to protect his right to have a gun. That's morally reprehensible, right? It's okay to be like, okay, we can be, I don't know, I just don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. I don't want to think about it. That's okay in my book. That's an avoidance tactic that sometimes makes sense. What's not acceptable in any way, shape, or form is to say that some people need to die. But right, I'm operating under the idea that I need to be internally consistent. I need to say that if no one deserves to die, we need to do all we can to prevent death. And I've lost my train of thought. I'm in a really uncomfortable position. My feet are falling asleep. I've been recording for 12 minutes. I gotta get to the point. So we've talked about gun violence, and now how can we become internally consistent on the 3 ways that the state interferes with who lives and who dies, when the state decides who lives and who dies. So, I really cannot choose these things for you. All I can ask for you to be is internally consistent, but obviously I have my own opinions. I'm really hoping that's not going to get in the way of people hearing me out, okay? Halfway through, let's just put cards on the table. We're starting from the premise that the state doesn't get to decide who lives and who dies, because that's God's choice. And now, if you remember when I introduced this is a death with dignity conversation. This is a conversation that is held when people are approached with the idea that sometimes at the end of people's lives, when they are very sick and going to die, maybe we shouldn't force their family to watch them starve to death after their feeding tube is taken out, because that is how somebody technically dies, when their feeding tube is taken away, after they have no brain function, after they lose all brain function and cannot swallow, cannot ask to be fed. And anyway, this is really depressing. This is why people don't want to think about it. And so therein lies the opportunity for internal inconsistencies to sneak in. Yeah, we're being sneaky. So, if the state is not allowed to decide who lives and who dies, Well, then that means that the state really shouldn't be killing people, for dang sure. So if you think that the state shouldn't decide who lives and who dies, you gotta be against capital punishment. You just have to be. I can't see a way around it. These are the choices you have. So, the thornier issue then becomes abortion. And in that case, I would say the internally consistent thing is that you can't tell a woman whether or not she can have an abortion. And other people also can have abortions. You cannot tell somebody who's pregnant whether or not they can have an abortion, because the state is not the person who should decide who lives and who dies. Now, I want to let that breathe, but unfortunately, YouTube doesn't do well with that. So, we're moving swiftly on. Another interesting, and this is what made me really want to start this. There are people who believe that the state should not be able to tell a person who's pregnant whether or not they can have an abortion, but that also believe that people should die miserable, painful deaths because suicide is always wrong. I'm sorry if I'm misrepresenting your opinion. Feel free to comment below what your actual opinion is. But like I said, we got to keep moving. This one to me seems like a slam dunk. A woman can decide when a pregnancy should end, but she can't decide when she should end. And I agree. It is fundamentally immoral to let somebody who is suicidal die. That is fundamentally immoral, and if you are really feeling like the world doesn't need you, that's not true. The world does need you. And I need you to stop watching this video and dial 988 if you're in the United States. And if you are not in the United States, I'll put some online resources down below, because the world does need you. You need to be here. So, with that covered, let's take the hardest one for me, as somebody who believes that if we're coming from the position that all life is sacred and all life needs to be protected, how can I, as somebody who's against the death penalty, well, that makes sense, that's not an issue. How can I, as a person who believes that women should, and people who are pregnant should be able to, with their doctor, make choices about what happens to their pregnancy, and if somebody is at the end of their life, they should not die in misery because some people are squeamish about the end of the life. How am I internally consistent? And I would like to remind you that in this rose garden, which we're currently in a rose garden that you can't see, because if you were to see the roses, then you'd be able to see the buildings, and then you'd be able to find me, and we're not doing that. In this rose garden, we reject the premise. And what premise are we rejecting? We are rejecting the premise that life is a binary thing. That some people are alive and some people are dead. This is where it's like, that is genuinely a hard thing to fathom, right? Until you've been around somebody who's dying, and then you're like, oh, shoot. Are you alive or are you dead? Or you've been around somebody who is pregnant, and the physical reality that somebody that you're very excited for your niece or nephew, but that like, but my sister-in-law is alive, and she is more alive than they are, that's for dang sure. So that is how I am internally consistent, is all I'm saying. And I invite you to, if you want to agree with me, adopt that reasoning as well. If you don't, and if you disagree with me, please comment down below. Because the thing that I find the most interesting and the most hard to deal with is people who want to balance the fact that they want the state to be able to kill people as their number one concern in this situation. Those are the people I'm most interested in. And I'm sorry, I kind of phrased that in a disrespectful way. A more respectful way to say that is, there is a world that most people live in that says that there is evil that somebody can do that is evil enough that they should die. And who is the best to decide that? Well, a jury of your peers and the judge that knows the law and can decide whether or not the law says you are allowed to be killed by the law. That, I think you can genuinely agree with me and say that people who are close to being alive or close to being dead are not quite technically alive and therefore have a different set of rules. I think you can agree with me on that. Or you could take the stance that the potential for life is what really matters here. But in that case, I really think the potential for life means that you have to that the state doesn't allow for you to kill people. So this is where I'm at. I guess what I'm saying is that the only things that you can't, the things that are mutually exclusive, are positions that say the potential for life must be protected at all costs. That means the state cannot kill people. It cannot allow individuals or doctors to decide when lives should end that are close to the end of their life, and they cannot allow for people who are pregnant to end their pregnancies until it affects their own life. And the rest is just politics. That's what I think. If, unlike me, you don't believe that, and wait, now I've confused myself. Have I mentioned that it's I'm like 13 minutes away from needing dinner? I guess we should bring it back to Charlie Kirk. I personally have seen a lot of people hemming and hawing about political violence and about how political violence is unacceptable. But what they really are meaning is that political assassinations are unacceptable, because they find the political violence of a woman potentially dying or actually dying because she wasn't unable to receive medical care for a pregnancy that ended in the most tragic way as a natural outgrowth of their own politics, that the political potential for life is more important to protect than the reality of life for some people. So I think another way that Charlie Kirk's death has been teaching us about the sanctity of life is that it really points to the inconsistencies that we apply to our political opinions based on our morals. Because some people who have fundamentally different morals than Charlie Kirk are whitewashing his legacy and saying, well, he said evil things, but because he wasn't an overtly violent person, the fact that other people did violent things because of what he did is fine. When they could just instead say, it's never okay to kill anybody. It's never okay. But they don't believe that, so hoops. You gotta jump through those hoops. Anyway, you should read what Billy wrote. I would highly recommend it. Again, it's Who Deserves to Die. It's on her Substack, which I will leave linked. She relies heavily on Dr. Jamar Tisby's own Substack thing. What a world we live in. And I would recommend that, although I have not read it myself. But I think that it's probably a good idea to hear perspectives of people who feel complicated things instead of easy to define things. The easy to define things are not how we're going to seek truth in a world where political violence is simply a part of our lives now, in ways that become more obvious as time goes on. We just simply are. I think a lot about the idea that people, and it's something that Billy's work has helped, and her brother's has helped illuminate for me, that it's not about the truth for a large amount of political conservative movement, right? It doesn't matter what the truth is to people who want to base reality about their feelings, no matter what they say. So I was going to go down the wrong route there for a second. What I really mean when I thought more about it is that some people are neither emotionally nor intellectually curious. They are not interested in investigating why they think something or why they feel something. So if you are somebody who feels uncomfortable with the idea that your position on the death penalty doesn't actually line up
with the rest of your values, but you're not actually curious as to why or motivated to like resolve this in a way that is growth oriented, then well, one, you're not here. You didn't make it to the end of the video, so congratulations. I'm not talking about you. But two, I think it's really hard. I think it's going to be really hard for you to push through the cognitive dissonance, the really uncomfortable feeling. You get to the uncomfortable feeling and you say, "Oh, it's time to leave. This can't be for me. I don't have to think about things because I don't want to. I lack the curiosity." And like several other things. Like, don't even worry about it. I'm a social psychologist. There's so many more things than just one. No one organizes their life around one reason. That's ridiculous. So anyway, I guess that's what I'm interested in making sure we all remember to practice, that we need to be curious and follow that curiosity until we feel like we've answered our question for real and not just for now. And now for now is fine, but like that's not the end. You will feel peace when you have the right answer. That's not a scientific promise. That's a spiritual one. Okay.
It's not the reality that feels right to people who listen to Charlie Kirk, and that's why he doesn't feel like he needs to address reality, or needed to address reality when he was talking about, I don't care enough about his actual position, because I don't believe that his actual position came from a place of truth, so maybe I shouldn't argue with a dead man. Anyway, the truth matters, though, to most people, and we just need to get around to accessing the truth. And I think as the political violence increases, it becomes more and more important for us to be able to access truth and reality, because how else are we going to end the violence? Because I just don't know another way around it. So I would encourage you to seek truth, the truth of your own opinions, and that means that your opinions should be complicated. They should also be internally consistent. And when you know that your own truth and you can stand in it in an effective way, that truth that means you shouldn't be scared of somebody else's. It shouldn't intimidate you. But if it does, maybe that's because your truth isn't right. It's not the truth. And to whatever extent we can access that, oh boy, that's beyond my purview in terms of morality. I can only there's only so much actual truth I can contend with. I'm Kate. I really hope I've explained something, because I really think this matters. I think we really need to get a hold of what Charlie Kirk's death means for us as individuals. Otherwise, it's just going to continue to fester. And to be honest, I don't want Charlie Kirk, who was an evil man, I don't want responses to his death to be the thing that causes others pain and misery. I want his legacy to be the opposite of the way he lived. He himself, as an individual, is not the problem. He is a symptom of the problem. And the problem is that we are terrified of getting things wrong, and that fear gets in the way of us understanding truth and reality that is associated with that truth. Anyway, okay, I hope I explained something. Read Billy's Substack. Bye. Cut adrift, still floating. I'm only hanging on to watch you go down, my love. Ooh, love. You said love, thou knows. Oh, love, sweetheart.
You're so cruel.